The vibrations begin in the soles of your feet, a constant, low-frequency hum that travels up through the floorboards of the heavy army transport truck. It is a steady, rhythmic thrumming, the sound of rubber tires meeting the uneven surface of a winding dirt road. You lean your head back against the cold metal frame of the vehicle, feeling the slight jar of every pebble and the soft sway of the chassis as it navigates another hairpin turn. The air inside the cabin is thick with the scent of old canvas and the faint, metallic tang of gasoline. But as you climb higher, a new fragrance begins to seep through the gaps in the window seals. It is the smell of sun-baked earth and sagebrush, a dry, ancient aroma that seems to belong to another century entirely. You watch the landscape through the dust-streaked glass, observing how the world below is slowly falling away. The wide, shimmering heat of the Rio Grande Valley is being replaced by something more vertical, more imposing. The vibrant reds and ochres of the low desert are softening into the muted greens of the high country. Your body feels heavy, settled into the worn seat, and you find yourself matching your breathing to the slow, laborious gear shifts of the truck as it pulls itself up the steep incline of the Pajarito Plateau. Every mile brings a sense of further isolation, a feeling that you are leaving the familiar world behind and ascending into a place where the rules of the everyday no longer apply. As the road narrows, the heat of the afternoon begins to dissipate, replaced by a sudden, refreshing coolness that brushes against your skin. The transitions of the New Mexico landscape are sharp and tactile. One moment, you are squinting against the blinding glare of the desert sun, and the next, you are enveloped in the deep velvet shadows of the Chemez Mountains. The light here is different. It is filtered through the towering branches of ponderosa pines, casting long, dappled patterns across the hood of the truck. You reach out a hand to touch the window, feeling the glass grow colder beneath your fingertips. It is a quiet relief, a physical loosening of the tension you have carried since you left the train station at Lamy. The road continues its serpentine crawl, hugging the edges of sheer volcanic cliffs that drop away into deep, silent canyons. You notice the way the rock faces are pockmarked with ancient dwellings, the dark eyes of caves watching your progress with a timeless indifference. This is a land of secrets that existed long before you arrived, a place of stone and wind that has seen civilizations rise and fall into the dust. You feel small in the face of such scale, a tiny passenger in a metal box, being delivered to a destination that doesn't officially exist on any map. But before we journey deeper into the shadows of the Mesa, if you are settling in for the night and finding comfort in these quiet histories, you are in the right place. Here at the Slumber Archives, we share new history narrations just like this one every single day, woven specifically to help you drift into a peaceful sleep. If you find these stories a welcome companion to your rest, please consider subscribing so you never miss a night of exploration. A simple like on the video also helps others who are seeking a quiet corner of the world find us too. Now let us return to that winding road where the air is growing thinner and the scent of pine needles is becoming almost intoxicating in its freshness. The truck rounds a final, sweeping bend, and the forest opens up to reveal a sprawling mesa top, a flat expanse of land that seems to float between the earth and the sky. This is Los Alamos. At first glance, it is a jarring sight, a collection of emerald green meadows and dark forests interrupted by the raw, pale scars of new construction. You see the glint of sunlight off corrugated metal roofs and the stark black lines of barbed wire fences that cut through the wildflowers. It is a hidden fortress, a city built in a fever of urgency, yet surrounded by a silence so profound it feels like a physical weight against your ears. The driver slows as you approach the main gate, and for a moment, the truck idles in the middle of the road. You look out at the guards in their crisp uniforms, their movements measured and professional, and you feel the weight of the security badge pinned to your lapel. It is a small piece of plastic and metal, but it is your only identity here. You have left your name and your past at the bottom of the mountain. Up here, you are a technician, a set of hands, a keeper of a mystery that you yourself do not yet fully understand. The gate swings open with a low metallic groan, and the truck rolls forward, crossing the threshold into the secret city. As you step out of the vehicle, the first thing you notice is the sound of the wind. It is a constant, rushing sigh through the needles of the pines, a sound that mimics the distant ocean. It is cold, much colder than you expected, and you pull your wool coat tighter around your shoulders, the fabric rough and comforting against your neck. The ground beneath your boots is a mixture of soft pine mast and gritty volcanic tuff, a pale, porous rock that crumbles easily under pressure. You take a deep breath, and the air is so sharp, so clean, that it almost stings your lungs. It carries the faint, lingering scent of wood smoke from the old ranch school buildings, a cozy, domestic smell that contrasts sharply with the utilitarian rows of olive-drab barracks stretching out before you. You begin to walk, your footsteps muffled by the earth, observing the strange alchemy of this place. There are scientists in tweed jackets walking alongside soldiers in fatigue caps, their heads bent in low, intense conversation. There are mud puddles in the unpaved streets that reflect the vast, bruised purple of the New Mexico sky. The architecture is a frantic jumble of the old and the new. The sturdy, hand-hewn timber of the original mountain retreat, standing side by side with the flimsy plywood walls of the temporary laboratories. It feels like a film set that has been abandoned halfway through production, or perhaps a frontier town at the edge of the world, where the stakes are not gold or land, but the very fabric of reality itself. You find yourself stopping by a low stone wall, looking out over the edge of the Mesa. From this vantage point, the world seems to stretch on forever. You can see the dark humps of the Sangre de Cristo mountains in the distance, their peaks still dusted with the pale white of late spring snow. Below you, the canyons are filled with a deep indigo light as the afternoon begins to wane. It is a landscape of staggering beauty, a place that demands a certain kind of reverence, and yet you know that inside those plain, wooden buildings behind you, men and women are working with materials that defy the natural order. The ache in your back from the long journey begins to settle into a dull, manageable warmth. You watch a hawk circle lazily in the thermals above the canyon, its wings outstretched and motionless, a silent sentinel in the thinning light. There is a strange peace here, despite the frantic pace of the work and the heavy presence of the military. It is the peace of a place that is removed from the rest of the world, a sanctuary of intellect and industry perched on a pedestal of ancient stone. As you turn away from the view and begin the walk toward your assigned quarters, you notice the small details of daily life that persist even here. A line of laundry snapping in the breeze behind a row of Quonset huts. The sound of a radio playing a faint, crackling big band tune from an open window. The sight of a young woman pushing a baby carriage over the uneven ground, her face set in a look of quiet determination. These glimpses of the ordinary make the extraordinary nature of your surroundings feel even more surreal. You are part of a community of thousands, all living in a shadow, all bound by a collective silence that is as thick as the mountain mist. The shadows of the pines grow longer, stretching across the dirt paths like dark fingers reaching for the evening. You feel a sense of profound exhaustion washing over you, the kind of tiredness that comes from a long journey into the unknown. Your room, when you finally reach it, is small and sparse. A narrow cot, a wooden desk, a single window looking out toward the dark silhouette of the mountains. You sit on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of the day settle into your bones. The wool of your blanket is coarse but warm, and as you lie back, you listen to the sounds of the secret city settling in for the night. There is the distant clatter of a mess hall, the rhythmic footfalls of a sentry on patrol, and always that constant, sighing wind in the trees. You close your eyes, and in the darkness you can still feel the phantom vibration of the truck, the steady climb up the winding road, the ascent from the heat of the valley to the cool, thin air of the plateau. You are here now. You are part of the Mesa, and as the mountain air fills the room, cold and scented with pine, you let the silence of the high country wrap around you like a heavy cloak, pulling you down into a deep, dreamless sleep. The morning light filters through the thin curtains of your temporary quarters, not with a sudden glare, but with a soft, pale greyness that speaks of the high altitude. It is a quiet awakening, the kind that happens when the air is so still you can hear the faint, rhythmic ticking of a wristwatch on the bedside table. You rise, the floorboards cold against the soles of your feet, and as you dress in the practical, heavy fabrics required for the Mesa, you feel the weight of the day ahead. This is not like any other job you have ever held. There is no sign on the road that led you here, no mention of this place in the letters you wrote to your family back home, and as you step out into the crisp morning, you are reminded that, for all intents and purposes, you have stepped off the edge of the known world. The walk toward the center of the settlement takes you past rows of hastily constructed wooden barracks and the skeletal frames of buildings still rising from the dust. Everything smells of fresh-cut pine and damp earth. Eventually, you reach the checkpoint, the gateway that separates the residential sprawl from the heart of the project. It is centered around the big house, a sturdy two-story building of stone and heavy timber that once served as the centerpiece of the boys' school that stood here before the army arrived. Now, it is the threshold of a different kind of education. You join a small queue of men and women, all of them dressed in heavy overcoats or lab smocks, their breath blooming in little clouds of white vapor. There is a strange, shared silence among you, a quietude born not of cold, but of the understanding that once you pass through this gate, you are leaving your old self behind. As you reach the front of the line, a military policeman stands firmly in your path. He is young, his face scrubbed clean, and his uniform pressed with sharp creases that seem out of place against the rugged backdrop of the Jemez Mountains. He does not smile, but his movements are practiced and efficient. You reach into your pocket and produce your identification papers, the last documents that bear your full name and your history. He takes them, his gloved fingers moving slowly as he compares the photograph to your face. You stand still, feeling the cool wind tug at the collar of your coat, watching as he consults a clipboard. It is a moment of profound transition. You are being scrubbed from the public record. From this point forward, you will not be a chemist, a technician, or a clerk with a home address and a family tree. You will be a number, a clearance level, a set of hands working toward a goal that remains whispered and veiled. The guard hands you a small, rectangular badge. It is simple, encased in a metal frame with a clip on the back, bearing a grainy black and white photograph of yourself and a series of letters and digits. He keeps your original papers, filing them away into a dark wooden box. As you pin the badge to your lapel, you feel a peculiar lightness, a sensation of drifting away from the earth. You have surrendered your identity in exchange for entry into the secret city. You are now a resident of Site Y. To the post office in Albuquerque, you are merely rural route box 163. To the rest of the country, you simply do not exist. The guard nods, a short, sharp movement of his chin, and gestures for you to pass through the gate. Stepping onto the other side of the checkpoint feels like entering a dream where the physics of the world have subtly shifted. You walk along the dirt paths, passing scientists whose names you recognize from textbooks, men who once lectured in the great halls of Europe and the Ivy League, now dressed in mud-spattered boots and flannel shirts, carrying their own coffee in chipped ceramic mugs. The surrealism of the environment settles into your bones. This is a town with no paved streets, no street lights, and no shops that sell anything other than the barest of necessities. It is a community of thousands, tucked away on a lonely plateau, hidden behind miles of barbed wire and guarded by men with machine guns, yet it hums with the energy of a frontier outpost. You look toward the horizon, where the Sangre de Cristo mountains rise in the distance, their peaks dusted with snow, and you realize that if you were to stand on those distant summits and look back toward this mesa, you would see nothing but trees and shadows. The town is a ghost, a shimmering mirage in the desert air. The laboratory buildings are long, low-slung structures of dark wood and corrugated metal, looking more like warehouses than the birthing place of a new age. As you approach the entrance to your assigned workspace, the sound of the mesa begins to change. The wind in the pines is replaced by the low industrial thrum of generators and the rhythmic clatter of typewriters. You feel the grit of the volcanic tuff beneath your boots, a fine white dust that seems to coat everything, your shoes, your trousers, the windows of the offices. It is a constant reminder of the ancient history of this land, a landscape formed by fire and ash millions of years ago, now hosting a group of people trying to master those very same forces. Inside, the air is warmer, smelling of ozone, floor wax, and the faint, acrid scent of chemicals. You navigate the corridors, your badge clicking softly against your chest with every step. There is a sense of urgency here that is muffled by the thick walls, a frantic pace hidden beneath a veneer of academic calm. People move with purpose, clutching folders stamped with top secret in bold red letters, their gazes fixed on the floor or on distant equations only they can see. You find your station, a long workbench cluttered with glassware, lead bricks, and delicate instruments that look like they belong in a watchmaker's shop. You sit down, the stool creaking under your weight, and for a moment you simply breathe. You are here. You have passed through the needle's eye. As you begin your work, the outside world fades into a hazy memory. The headlines of the newspapers, the movements of armies across the oceans, the very passage of time itself, all of it is filtered through the lens of the project. You are part of a collective mind, a vast machine where every cog is a human being sworn to silence. You find a strange comfort in the anonymity. There is a peace in knowing that you are exactly where you are supposed to be, even if you can never tell anyone where that is. The morning progresses in a blur of measurements and notations, the steady work of your hands providing a grounding rhythm to the day. You are no longer the person who boarded the train in the city. You are a ghost in a ghost town, working in the shadows of the high desert, contributing your small part to a secret that is heavier than the very mountains surrounding you. And as you work, the silence of the mesa remains just outside the door, waiting for the sun to dip low and the shadows to stretch across the canyon walls, calling you back to the quiet anonymity of your new life. The first thing you notice when you step out of the laboratory is the scent. A sharp, resinous perfume of freshly sawn pine that seems to hang in the thin air, clinging to your wool coat and mixing with the crisp, cold oxygen of the high altitude. It is a smell of raw beginnings, of a world being carved out of the wilderness with frantic speed. You stand for a moment on the dirt path, feeling the grit of volcanic tuff beneath your boots, and listen to the rhythmic, distant chorus of hammers. It is the heartbeat of the mesa, a constant, staccato thrumming that never truly stops, as if the city itself is a living organism, stretching its wooden limbs further into the forest with every passing hour. You begin your walk back toward your quarters, navigating a landscape that feels less like a town and more like a fever dream of geometry and haste. To your left and right, the ubiquitous green-painted wooden barracks rise up from the dust, rows upon rows of them, looking like olive-drab caterpillars resting on the red earth. They are identical, utilitarian, and strangely comforting in their uniformity. You pass the Sunt apartments, those slightly more permanent structures that have become symbols of status in this strange egalitarian society. You run your hand along the rough exterior of a building as you pass, feeling the grain of the wood and the slight tackiness of paint that hasn't quite dried in the mountain chill. There is a sense of precariousness here, as if, should the secret ever be told, the entire city might simply vanish back into the ponderosa pines from which it was birthed. The logistical marvel of it all often occupies your thoughts during these long, quiet walks. You think of the thousands of people, the Nobel laureates, the young technicians like yourself, the cooks, the janitors, and the military police, all fed, housed, and hidden away in a place that, only a year ago, was little more than a quiet ranch school. You imagine the trucks labouring up the treacherous, winding road of the Ottawa switchbacks, their gears grinding as they haul tons of lumber, steel, and delicate glassware into the clouds. It is a masterpiece of organised chaos, a city built on the fly, where the blueprint is often drawn only minutes before the foundation is poured. You feel the weight of this collective effort in your own tired muscles, a shared exhaustion that binds everyone on the Mesa together in a silent pact. As you walk, you pass a crew of workmen finishing a new dormitory. The air is thick with the golden dust of sawdust, dancing in the late light like tiny sparks of amber. You watch a carpenter drive a nail home with 3 clean strikes, a sound that echoes off the canyon walls, sharp and clear. There is no time for flourishes here, no room for the ornate or the decorative. Everything is stripped down to its essential function. The doors are heavy, the windows are small, and the heaters hum with a persistent, metallic rattle that becomes the background music to your life. You find a strange beauty in this austerity. It focuses the mind, stripping away the distractions of the outside world until there is nothing left but the work and the mountain. The wind picks up, whistling through the gaps in the hastily constructed walls, and you pull your collar tighter against your neck. You can feel the cold creeping through the soles of your shoes, a reminder that despite the frantic human activity, the Mesa remains an indifferent host. You are a guest of the high desert, sheltered by thin layers of pine and tar paper. You look toward the Jemez Mountains, their peaks already catching the first hints of a coming snow, and you realize how small this secret city truly is. It is a scatter of green boxes perched on the edge of infinity, a fragile island of logic and industry surrounded by a sea of ancient silent stone. You reach the door of your own quarters, the wood still smelling of the forest it recently left. As you turn the handle, you take one last breath of that sawdust-heavy air, feeling it fill your lungs with the essence of this place, the smell of a future being built in the dark, one plank and one nail at a time. The sound of the hammers continues, a low, steady pulse in the distance, reminding you that even while you sleep, the city will continue to grow, expanding its reach into the shadows of the canyon, waiting for the morning when the work begins anew. The piercing, metallic wail of the morning whistle cuts through the thin mountain air, vibrating against the thin wooden walls of your dormitory. It is a sound that does not merely wake you, but pulls you upward from the depths of a heavy, dreamless sleep, signaling that another day on the hill has begun. You lie still for a moment, feeling the weight of the coarse wool blankets against your chest, listening to the rhythmic creaking of floorboards as other technicians in nearby rooms begin their own slow transitions into the waking world. The air in the room is crisp, holding the lingering chill of the high desert night, and you can smell the faint, ever-present scent of pine needles and damp earth drifting through the small window. As you swing your feet out of bed, the cold floorboards feel smooth and unforgiving beneath your soles. There is no luxury here, no soft carpets to cushion your steps, only the functional reality of a city built in a hurry. You dress in silence, pulling on thick socks and sturdy trousers, feeling the familiar texture of the fabric against your skin. Every movement is deliberate, a slow ritual performed in the dim light of dawn. You reach for your heavy coat, the weight of it settling onto your shoulders like a mantle of responsibility, and step out into the hallway. The corridor is a symphony of soft sounds, the muffled cough of a colleague, the gentle click of a door latch, the low hum of a distant generator that never truly sleeps. Stepping outside the dormitory, you are met by the vast, pale expanse of the morning sky. The sun has not yet cleared the peaks of the Sangre de Cristo mountains to the east, leaving the Mesa bathed in a soft blue-grey light that softens the harsh edges of the laboratory buildings. Underfoot, the ground is a treacherous map of Los Alamos reality. Depending on the week, you find yourself navigating either a sea of fine, powdery dust that rises in small clouds with every step, or a thick, tenacious mud that clings to your boots, making each stride feel heavy and purposeful. Today, the mud is drying into stiff ridges, and you pick your way carefully along the wooden boardwalks that have been laid down to save the residents from the worst of the mire. The walk to the technical area is a steady uphill climb that warms your blood against the morning frost. You pass the rows of identical black-roofed houses where the scientists and their families live, their windows still dark or glowing with the soft amber light of a breakfast nook. There is a strange, quiet beauty in the way the smoke from dozens of wood stoves rises straight into the still air, forming thin, white pillars that seem to hold up the sky. You breathe in the sharp aroma of burning cedar and pinon, a scent that will forever be linked in your mind with this secret plateau. It is a peaceful moment, a brief interval of solitude before the intensity of the lab takes hold, and you find yourself watching the way the light catches the frost on the sagebrush, turning the mesa into a field of silver. As you approach the perimeter of the technical area, the atmosphere shifts. The casual quiet of the residential streets gives way to the hum of industry and the presence of the military police. You see the tall chain-link fences topped with coils of barbed wire, silver strands that glint coldly in the growing light. Your hand instinctively goes to your pocket, fingers brushing against the cool, hard surface of your identification badge. It is your most important possession, a small piece of plastic and metal that defines your existence here, granting you passage through the invisible walls that separate the world of the Mesa from the world of the secret. You join the line of men and women converging on the main gate. There is little conversation. The morning air is too cold for idle talk, and the weight of the work ahead hangs over everyone like a shared secret. You listen to the sound of boots on the gravel, a rhythmic crunching that sounds like a slow marching army. And then you hear it, the distinctive mechanical clatter of the turnstiles. It is a sharp, percussive sound, a series of metallic clicks and thuds as each person presents their badge, waits for the nod from the armed guard, and pushes through the heavy steel arms. When it is your turn, you step forward and hold out your badge. The guard's eyes move from the plastic card to your face and back again, a silent, practiced scrutiny that never feels personal, yet never feels relaxed. You press your hip against the cold metal bar of the turnstile and push. The mechanism resists for a fraction of a second before giving way with a heavy, satisfying clack, clack, clack. That sound marks the true beginning of your day. It is the sound of leaving your private thoughts behind and entering the collective effort of the project. Once you pass through that gate, you are no longer just an individual. You are a component of a vast, complex machine, a technician whose hands and mind are dedicated to a task so large it can barely be spoken of. The technical area is a maze of low, functional buildings, many of them painted a dull olive drab or left as raw, weathered wood. Steam pipes run overhead, swathed in thick insulation, hissing softly as they carry heat to the various laboratories. You walk past Building D, where the chemists are already beginning their delicate work with substances that have no names in the outside world. You can hear the faint, rhythmic thumping of vacuum pumps and the distant whine of a centrifuge starting up. The air here smells different than it does in the residential area. The cedar smoke is replaced by a sterile metallic tang, the scent of ozone, machine oil, and acid. You reach the entrance to your own workspace, a nondescript door that belies the extraordinary things happening inside. Before entering, you take a final look back toward the mountains. The sun has finally crested the ridge, and the first golden rays are spilling across the mesa, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The vastness of the landscape is a reminder of how small this city is, a tiny island of human ingenuity tucked away in the wilderness. You feel the cold brass of the doorknob in your hand, a solid grounding sensation. Inside, the transition to the workday is completed. You swap your heavy outdoor coat for a clean white lab coat, the fabric stiff with starch. You feel the change in your posture as you button it up. The coat is a uniform, a signal to yourself that the time for wandering and contemplation is over. You check your pocket watch, the steady ticking a small, comforting heartbeat against your ribs. It is exactly 8 o'clock. The morning ritual is finished. The secret city is wide awake, and the work, the slow, meticulous, and world-altering work, is waiting for you on the bench. You step into the main laboratory, the floorboards silent now under the soles of your work shoes, as the first hum of the day's experiments begins to rise around you like a tide. The air inside the laboratory feels different from the crisp, pine-scented breeze of the mesa outside. It is a heavy, still atmosphere, smelling faintly of ozone, floor wax, and the metallic tang of machined copper. As you walk deeper into the tech area, the visual dissonance of this place strikes you anew, a strange marriage of the frontier and the future that never quite ceases to be remarkable. Above your head, the ceiling is supported by rough-hewn wooden rafters, a reminder that not so long ago, these buildings were intended for nothing more complex than a mountain retreat. Yet, resting upon the sturdy, scarred wooden workbenches, are instruments of such exquisite precision and terrifying complexity that they seem to belong to another century entirely. You see the polished glass of vacuum tubes glowing with a soft, ethereal violet light, and the intricate webbing of copper wires, color-coded and bundled, snaking across the tables like the nervous system of some great, dormant creature. You reach for your white lab coat, draped over the back of a heavy oak chair. The fabric is stiff with starch, and as you slide your arms into the sleeves, the weight of it settles across your shoulders like a uniform, signaling the shift from the person who ate breakfast in a drafty hut to the technician who handles the building blocks of the universe. Next comes the film badge, a small, unassuming rectangle of plastic that you clip carefully to your lapel. It is a silent sentinel, a piece of photographic film tucked inside that watches over you, recording the invisible rays that permeate this room, the silent, unseen legacy of the materials you work with. You pat it once, a subconscious habit, acknowledging the unspoken bargain of the secret city. You give your labor and your silence, and in return, these small strips of film keep watch over your very cells. On the days when the work brings you closer to the heavy metals, there is the added weight of the lead apron, a thick, protective garment that makes your movements slow and deliberate, turning every gesture into a measured, solemn dance. The soundscape of the laboratory begins to fill your ears, a mechanical symphony that becomes the background radiation of your thoughts. There is the constant, low-grade thrum of the vacuum pumps, a rhythmic pulsing that vibrates through the soles of your shoes, suggesting a great heart beating somewhere beneath the floorboards. It is a comforting sound in its consistency, a sign that the experiments are holding, that the voids are being maintained. Interspersed with this hum is the sharp, erratic clicking of the Geiger counters. It is a dry, staccato sound, like the snapping of small twigs or the patter of dry rain on a tin roof. You have learned to listen to the frequency of those clicks the way a sailor listens to the wind. A slow, lazy rhythm is the sound of safety, a steady mechanical purr that tells you, The world is as it should be, but your ears are always tuned for the sudden acceleration, the frantic chatter that signals a change in the invisible landscape of the room. You move to your station, where a delicate glass apparatus sits encased in a wooden frame. Your hands, though calloused from the rugged life of the high desert, move with a practiced tenderness as you adjust a brass dial. The contrast is everywhere, the rustic and the refined, the primitive and the pinnacle of human thought. You might be using a sophisticated oscilloscope to track the movement of particles, yet the table it sits on was knocked together by a local carpenter using basic pine planks and common nails. You might be calculating the properties of a new alloy while looking out a window at a dirt path where a stray horse wandered by only an hour before. This is the essence of Los Alamos, a place where the most advanced physics in the world is practiced in buildings that look like they might belong to a logging camp or a summer school. As the morning progresses, you lose yourself in the tactile reality of the work. You feel the cool smoothness of the glass beakers and the slight resistance of the rubber hosing as you check the seals. There is a meditative quality to the maintenance of the equipment. You wipe down the surfaces with a soft cloth, removing the fine dust that blows in from the Chemez Mountains, ensuring that not a single speck of grit interferes with the delicate balance of the instruments. You are acutely aware of the invisible forces at play here, the way the air itself seems charged with a quiet intensity. It is a strange form of intimacy, working so closely with substances that cannot be seen or smelled, but whose presence is felt in the heat of a reaction or the steady glow of a dial. In this space, time seems to stretch and contract. Minutes might pass in a blurred rush of activity, or a single second might feel elongated as you wait for a needle to settle on a gauge. You are part of a vast interlocking machine, one small but vital gear in a mechanism that stretches across the entire Mesa and beyond. Every technician in their white coat, every scientist lost in a forest of equations, and every clerk filing away top-secret memos is bound together by the gravity of the task at hand. And yet, within the walls of the tech area, the world feels very small and very focused. It is just you, the steady clicking of the counter, the blue-white light of the laboratory, and the slow, methodical pursuit of a secret that the earth has kept hidden since the beginning of time. You adjust your glasses, lean in closer to the bench, and let the rest of the world fade away, leaving only the work and the quiet, persistent hum of the pumps to fill the silence of the morning. The scent of distilled water and the sharp, clinical tang of ethyl alcohol hang heavy in the air, a constant reminder that in this laboratory, cleanliness is not merely a virtue, but a fundamental requirement of survival. You reach for a glass beaker, its surface cool and slick against your fingertips, and begin the rhythmic, repetitive process of the morning scrub. Each vessel must be etched of any ghost of a previous experiment, rinsed 3 times in deionized water until the droplets slide off the surface without leaving a single streak or blemish. There is a meditative quality to the friction of the brush against the glass, a soft, scratching sound that joins the chorus of the laboratory's ambient hum. You work with a slow, deliberate grace, aware that even a microscopic trace of residue could throw off a calculation by a fraction of a percent. And in the world of the secret city, a fraction of a percent is the difference between a successful test and a catastrophic failure. As you set the glassware to dry on the wooden rack, you turn your attention to the instruments that line the back of your workstation. They are temperamental things, sensitive to the slightest shift in temperature, or the vibration of a heavy truck passing on the gravel road outside. You pick up a small, weighted calibration tool, feeling its surprising density in the palm of your hand. To calibrate these machines is to engage in a silent dialogue with the invisible forces of the universe. You adjust the dials with the tips of your fingers, moving them by increments so small they are felt more than they are seen. You watch the needle on the gauge, waiting for it to settle, holding your breath so the carbon dioxide of your own lungs doesn't disturb the delicate equilibrium of the scale. It is a test of patience, a slow dance of alignment, where you must remain perfectly still, letting your heart beat slow until you are as steady as the stone foundations of the building itself. In the corner of the room stands the hot cell, a formidable structure of lead and steel that guards the most precious and perilous materials in your care. You step toward it, the floorboards groaning ever so slightly under your weight, and peer through the thick, yellow-tinted window of lead glass. The glass is several inches deep, a heavy barrier that distorts the light and makes the interior of the cell look as though it is submerged in a deep amber sea. Behind this shield, the air is still and sterile. You reach for the handles of the remote manipulators, the mechanical waldos that serve as your hands within the chamber. They are heavy and cumbersome at first, the metal grips cold and unyielding. But as you slide your fingers into the loops, they begin to feel like an extension of your own body. You move the external levers, and inside the cell, the steel claws mimic your movements with an eerie, disjointed precision. You are handling a small ceramic crucible, no larger than a thimble, which contains a substance so rare that its value cannot be measured in currency. To touch it directly would be a death sentence, yet through the mechanical arms, you treat it with the tenderness of a jeweler. You feel the faint resistance of the gears as the claws close around the vessel, a tactile feedback that travels up the metal rods and into your own elbows and shoulders. There is a strange, disconnected intimacy in this work. You are inches away from the heart of the project, yet separated by a wall of lead that makes the material feel as distant as a star in another galaxy. You carefully pour a liquid reagent into the crucible, watching as the two substances meet, a tiny puff of vapor rising and then vanishing into the ventilation system. Your eyes are fixed, your focus absolute, as you navigate the three-dimensional space of the cell, mindful of every shadow and every reflection in the amber glass. Once the reaction is complete and the materials are safely stowed, you withdraw your hands from the manipulators, feeling a sudden lightness in your arms as the weight of the task is lifted. But the work is not yet finished. You move to the high desk where your official logbook lies open, its pages white and expectant under the glow of a task lamp. This is a numbered book, bound in dark green cloth, its spine reinforced and its pages watermarked to prevent any tampering. It is more than just a notebook. It is a legal record, a piece of history that will be locked in a heavy safe at the end of every shift. You pick up your fountain pen, feeling the familiar weight of the barrel, and begin to record the data from the morning's run. The ink flows onto the page in a steady, rhythmic script. You write down the temperatures, the pressures, the exact times of each observation, and the subtle changes in color you witness through the lead glass. There is no room for flourish or ambiguity here. Each letter must be clear, each number distinct, for these figures will be scrutinized by men with names like Oppenheimer and Fermi, men who are building a bridge into a future that no one can quite imagine. You find a quiet satisfaction in the scratch of the nib against the paper, a sound that seems to ground you after the ethereal work with the remote manipulators. The logbook represents the intersection of the physical and the theoretical, a place where the messy reality of the laboratory is distilled into the cold, hard logic of mathematics. As you write, you become aware of the silence of the room, a deep and heavy quiet that seems to push in from the surrounding mountains. The lab is a world of its own, a pocket of intense concentration shielded from the chaos of the outside world. You think briefly of the thousands of people living in the wooden barracks and trailers just a few miles away, the families trying to make a home in a place that officially does not exist. But here, in the tech area, those concerns feel like a dream. Your reality is the curve of a meniscus in a graduated cylinder, the steady flicker of a vacuum tube, and the weight of the secret you carry in your mind. You lean back for a moment, stretching your cramped fingers, and look out the high, narrow window at the top of the wall. You can see a sliver of the New Mexico sky, a blue so vivid it seems almost artificial compared to the muted tones of the laboratory. The transition from the vastness of the landscape to the microscopic precision of your work is a jarring one, yet you have learned to live in both worlds. You return to your logbook, adding a final note about the stability of the sample before closing the cover with a soft, muffled thud. The dust motes dance in the beam of the lamp, swirling in the air you breathe, and you realize that even the air is a part of the experiment, a medium through which the invisible forces move. You stand up, your joints popping quietly in the still air, and begin the process of tidying your station. You wipe down the countertops with a fresh cloth, ensuring that not a single speck of dust or drop of water remains. You check the seals on the gas lines, the tension on the vacuum hoses, and the alignment of the lead bricks that provide secondary shielding. The precision of the invisible requires a constant vigilance, a refusal to accept anything less than perfection. It is a tiring way to live, perhaps, but there is a profound sense of purpose in it. You are a guardian of the small things, the technician who ensures that the grand theories of the physicists have a solid foundation in the physical world. As you prepare to move on to your next task, you take a final look at the hot cell, the amber light still glowing within, and feel a sense of quiet pride. The world may never know your name, and your work may remain classified for decades to come, but in this moment, in this room, you are the one who holds the balance. You are the one who sees what cannot be seen, and who records the truth of the universe, one careful line of ink at a time. The hum of the pumps continues, a steady, mechanical heartbeat that pulses through the floor and into your boots, reminding you that the work goes on, tireless and exacting as the secret city dreams under the vast, silent sky. The metal clip of your security badge feels heavy against your chest, a small, cold weight that reminds you of your place in this hidden world. You walk down the long, dimly lit corridor of the laboratory, the sound of your own footsteps muffled by the thick rubber soles of your shoes, echoing softly against the concrete walls. There is a specific kind of silence here, one that isn't empty, but rather filled with the pressure of things unsaid. You carry your notebook tucked under your arm, its pages filled with columns of figures, voltage readings, and the precise timing of electrical pulses. And yet, if someone were to ask you what these numbers ultimately build toward, you would have to shake your head. This is the reality of compartmentalization, a word that has become as familiar to you as your own name. You are a master of the how, a craftsman of the minute and the technical. You know exactly how much pressure to apply to a vacuum seal, and you can tell by the specific pitch of a generator if the frequency is drifting by even a fraction of a hertz. But the why is a ghost that flits just out of reach, a puzzle with most of its pieces locked in different safes, in different buildings, held by people whose faces you see in the mess hall, but whose work you are forbidden to discuss. It is a strange way to live, focusing all your intellect and energy on a single gear, while the great machine remains shrouded in a heavy, dark curtain. You are a vital part of a whole that you are not permitted to see, and as you turn the key in the lock of your workstation, you feel that familiar tug of curiosity, quickly suppressed by the habit of caution. As you settle into your chair, your eyes wander to the wall above your workbench. There, pinned at eye level, is a poster that has become part of the very fabric of your vision. It depicts a shadow over a face or perhaps a finger pressed to silent lips with bold, stark lettering that warns you, silence means security. The ink is slightly faded from the high-altitude sun that streams through the windows during the day, but the message remains sharp and uncompromising. It follows you everywhere. You see it in the laboratory, in the grocery store, and even in the community center, where you go to unwind. It is a constant, quiet hum in the back of your mind, a reminder that a single careless word dropped over a cup of coffee or a casual remark made while waiting for the bus could unravel the tapestry of safety that protects this canyon. The psychological toll of this silence is something you feel most acutely in the evenings, when the workday is done and you return to the small, wooden apartment you share with your spouse. You sit across from each other at the small kitchen table, the steam from a pot of stew rising between you, and the air feels thick with the things you cannot share. You want to tell them about the breakthrough you had today, about the way the oscilloscope finally steadied after hours of frustration, or the strange blue glow you caught out of the corner of your eye during a high-voltage test. But you cannot. You talk instead about the weather, about the dust that seems to find its way into every corner of the house, or the quality of the meat at the commissary. You watch their face, wondering if they are also holding back secrets of their own, perhaps something they heard while working in administration or the hospital. You are two people living in the most intimate of circles, yet separated by a wall of classified data that neither of you dares to breach. You step outside onto your small porch for a moment, the night air crisp and smelling of pine needles and wood smoke. The stars above Los Alamos are incredibly bright, piercing the darkness with a clarity that makes the world feel vast and your own existence feel very small. You lean against the railing, feeling the rough texture of the wood beneath your palms, and you think about the letters you write home to your parents in the Midwest. Every sentence is a careful dance. You write about the beauty of the Sangre de Cristo mountains, the way the light turns purple at dusk, and the thinness of the air that makes you winded when you walk uphill. You tell them you are doing important work for the war effort, but you can never tell them what that work is. You know that every letter you drop into the mailbox is opened and read by a censor, a stranger who looks for patterns in your mundane descriptions, searching for a leak you didn't even know you were capable of making. The weight of the secret is not just about the information itself. It is about the isolation it creates. You are part of a community of thousands, all of you bound together by the same mission, yet you are all islands, separated by the very rules meant to keep you safe. You see a friend at the PX and you want to ask how their project is coming along, but the words die in your throat. Instead, you nod, you smile, and you talk about the upcoming film screening or the wind that rattled the windows last night. There is a loneliness in this shared endeavor, a sense that you are all walking together through a fog, holding onto a rope, but unable to see the person just a few feet ahead of you. You find yourself retreating into the physical sensations of your work to cope, the cool touch of the glass tubes, the smell of ozone that lingers on your lab coat, the rhythmic clicking of the counters. These are things that do not require words, things that exist in the realm of the tangible and the certain. As you prepare for bed, you move through the familiar motions of your evening routine, the floorboards creaking softly under your weight. You hang your trousers over the chair, and as you do, you feel the small rectangular bulge of your identification card in the pocket. It is your passport in this world, your proof that you belong here, even if you don't fully understand what here is. You lie down and pull the heavy wool blankets up to your chin, listening to the wind moan through the canyons. It is a lonely sound, a reminder of the wilderness that surrounds this artificial island of high technology. You wonder if the people in the valley below ever look up at the lights on the Mesa and wonder what is happening here, or if we are just another mystery to them, a flicker of light against the dark New Mexican sky. The posters on the walls seem to watch you, even in your sleep, their silent warnings drifting into your dreams. You dream of equations that turn into birds and fly away before you can read them, of doors that require keys you don't possess, and of a great unspoken truth that sits just behind the horizon, waiting for the sun to rise. But for now, there is only the dark and the steady, quiet breathing of your partner beside you. You reach out and touch their hand under the covers, a simple human connection, that requires no clearance, no codes, and no silence. In the stillness of the night, the secret feels less like a burden and more like a shared atmosphere, something you all breathe in and out together, a collective holding of the breath as the world waits for whatever it is you are building to finally be revealed. The silence is heavy, yes, but it is also a shield, a cocoon in which you and your colleagues work, shielded from the chaos of the world outside, focused entirely on the needles, the dials, and the ink that flows across the page, recording a history that has not yet been named. You close your eyes, letting the weight of the day sink into the mattress as the secret city continues its quiet, guarded vigil under the stars. The smell of ponderosa pine needles, baked by the high-altitude sun, drifts through the open windows of the laboratory, a sharp and resinous reminder that even here, amidst the vacuum tubes and the lead shielding, the wilderness is only a few feet away. You set down your calipers, the cool metal leaving a faint, silvery scent on your fingertips, and realize that your stomach has begun to ache with a hollow, midday hunger. It is time to step away from the workbench, to leave the glowing filaments and the meticulous scribbling behind for an hour of communal quiet. You step out into the bright, thin air of the Mesa, squinting against the brilliance of the New Mexico sky, and begin the short walk toward the massive, hulking silhouette of the Fuller Lodge. The lodge stands as a monument to a time before the secrets arrived, a masterpiece of vertical log construction that feels more like an ancient forest cathedral than a dining hall for scientists. As you pull open the heavy timber doors, the air changes instantly. The sharp, dry heat of the outdoors is replaced by a cool, dim interior that smells of old wood, floor wax, and the savory, heavy steam of lunch. Your boots clatter softly on the polished wood floors, a sound that joined by the low, rhythmic hum of 100 voices vibrating against the high, beamed ceilings. This is the heart of the hill, the place where the hierarchy of the outside world seems to soften and blur. You take your place in the queue, moving slowly past the serving station. There is a predictable weight to the heavy, thick-rimmed ceramic plates, the kind of crockery designed to survive 1,000 washings. Today, the meal is simple, dictated by the strange, invisible hand of wartime rationing that reaches even into this hidden fortress. You watch as a thick ladle of stew is plopped onto the ceramic, followed by a scoop of mashed potatoes and a slice of bread that feels dense and honest in your hand. There are no garnishes here, no flourishes of luxury, just the fuel required to keep the mind sharp and the hands steady for another 6 hours of labor. As you scan the room for a place to sit, you notice the familiar faces of the world's most brilliant minds. Over in the corner, near one of the massive stone fireplaces, a Nobel laureate is deep in conversation, his grey hair wild and unkempt, his sweater frayed at the elbows. He is laughing at something a young technician, someone no older than yourself, has just said. You find a small gap at a long communal table and slide onto the bench, your shoulder brushing against a theoretical physicist who is currently staring intently at a salt shaker as if it held the secrets to the universe. There is a peculiar etiquette to these midday meals, a social code born of necessity, and the ever-present shadow of the security officers. You begin to eat, the warmth of the stew spreading through your chest, and listen to the drift of conversation around you. It is a strange, fragmented symphony. People talk about the weather, which is always changing on the Mesa. They talk about the latest film being shown at the theater, or the quality of the mud on the roads after the last thunderstorm. They discuss the books they are reading and the music they miss hearing on high-fidelity record players, but beneath the surface of this mundane chatter, there is a deliberate, careful silence. You notice how everyone avoids the what. No one asks what you were measuring this morning. No one mentions the specific isotopes or the geometry of the components resting on your bench. It is a practiced dance of the tongue, where you can spend an entire hour laughing and debating the merits of a particular jazz musician without ever acknowledging that you are all here to build a weapon that will change the course of human history. The air in the Fuller Lodge is thick with the things that are not being said, a collective holding of breath that everyone has grown used to. You focus on the physical sensations of the moment to ground yourself. The weight of the silver-plated fork in your hand, the way the light filters through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air like tiny golden particles. The logs of the walls are massive, some of them 2 feet thick, and you find yourself tracing the patterns of the bark with your eyes, thinking about how long these trees stood on the mountain before they were harvested to create this sanctuary. There is a profound sense of safety within these walls, a feeling that as long as you are inside the lodge, the world outside, the war, the oceans, the burning cities, is a distant, fading dream. Across the table, someone passes you a glass of water, their fingers briefly touching yours. It is a small human connection in a place defined by cold calculations. You nod your thanks, sipping the water, which tastes faintly of the minerals of the earth. The noise of the room begins to swell as more people arrive, a cacophony of clinking silverware and low-frequency murmurs that becomes a sort of white noise, a blanket of sound that allows you to retreat into your own thoughts. You think about the afternoon ahead, the delicate adjustments you must make to the sensors, and the way the ink looks when it dries on the graph paper, a dark, permanent record of a fleeting moment in time. As you finish your meal, you lean back for a moment, letting your spine press against the hard wood of the bench. The ache in your lower back from leaning over the workbench begins to dull, replaced by a pleasant, heavy lethargy. The communal atmosphere of the lodge is a rare comfort. It reminds you that you are not just a cog in a machine, but part of a village, a strange, secret village of ghosts and geniuses, all bound together by the same invisible thread. You watch a group of young women from the WAC detachment laughing near the door, their uniforms crisp and sharp against the rustic backdrop of the logs, and you realize how much life is being lived here in the gaps between the secrets. The meal is over, but nobody seems in a particular hurry to leave. There is a lingering quality to the midday hour, a desire to stretch out the normalcy for as long as possible before returning to the high-security zones and the barbed wire. You watch the sunlight shift across the floor, the shadows of the window frames lengthening as the clock on the wall ticks forward with a steady, unyielding rhythm. Eventually, the physicist next to you stands up, offering a polite, distracted nod, and the spell is broken. You rise from the bench, picking up your heavy ceramic plate and carrying it to the wash station. The clatter of dishes being stacked is rhythmic and industrious, a domestic sound that anchors the high-minded theories of the morning back to the reality of the earth. As you walk back toward the heavy timber doors, you take one last look at the great hall, the massive fireplaces, the soaring rafters, and the hundreds of people who are, for this brief window of time, just neighbors sharing a meal. Stepping back out into the bright New Mexico sun, the transition is jarring. The heat hits your face and the dry wind stirs the dust around your boots. The laboratory is waiting for you, with its humming equipment and its silent demands. You begin the walk back, feeling the weight of the afternoon ahead, but the warmth of the lodge stays with you for a few moments more. A lingering sense of belonging in a world that requires you to be a shadow. The secret city continues its quiet, guarded pulse, and you move back into its rhythm, one step at a time, across the sun-drenched dirt of the Mesa. You breathe in deeply, the scent of pine and ozone filling your lungs as you prepare to return to the needles, the dials, and the ink that records the unseen. The heavy lead-lined door of the laboratory clicks shut behind you, with a sound that is both final and protective, sealing away the wind of the Mesa and replacing it with the low, constant hum of the ventilation system. The air in here is different. It is filtered, scrubbed, and carries a faint, sharp metallic tang that seems to settle at the back of your throat. You feel the familiar weight of your lab coat, the starch still stiff against your neck, and you begin the slow, deliberate process of gloving up. The rubber is cool and slightly powdered, sliding over your fingers as you prepare to touch the untouchable. In this room, the work is not measured in miles or tons, but in micrograms and milliliters. You are standing before the fume hood, where the chemistry of the core takes place, a delicate, almost alchemical dance of purification that turns raw, chaotic elements into something refined and singular. Your eyes focus on the glassware, the intricate coils and flasks that hold the solutions of plutonium and uranium. They look deceptively ordinary, like water or weak tea, yet you handle them with a reverence that borders on the sacred. You watch the slow drip of a pipette, each translucent bead falling into the beaker with a rhythmic precision. The chemistry is temperamental, a matter of balancing acidity and temperature until the impurities are stripped away, leaving behind the heavy, silver-grey essence of the project. You feel the tension in your shoulders, a subtle tightening that you've learned to live with as you navigate the narrow margins of error allowed by these volatile substances. The glass is thin, the liquids are caustic, and the invisible energy they emit is a constant, silent presence in the room. Sometimes, when the lights are dimmed to better read the phosphorescent dials of the monitoring equipment, you catch a glimpse of something that feels like a dream. In the depths of the cooling tanks or near the concentrated solutions, a soft, ethereal glow begins to manifest. It is a blue unlike any you have ever seen in nature, not the blue of the New Mexico sky or the deep teal of a mountain lake, but a shimmering electric azure that seems to vibrate with its own internal light. This is Cherenkov radiation, the visual ghost of particles moving faster than light through the medium of the water. You find yourself staring at it, captivated by its eerie beauty, even as you know it is a warning. It is the light of the atom itself, a silent signal that the boundaries of physics are being pushed to their absolute limits. You stand there in the dimness, the blue light reflecting in your goggles, feeling a strange, quiet awe at the sheer power contained within such a small, glowing space. But the beauty is balanced by a profound, unrelenting vigilance. In these cramped workspaces, where the benches are cluttered with lead bricks and Geiger counters, you are always aware of the criticality. It is a word that hangs in the air, unspoken but ever present, referring to that invisible threshold where the material becomes self-sustaining, where the chain reaction begins. You move with a slow, practiced grace, ensuring that two containers of concentrated solution are never placed too close to one another on the table. You calculate the geometry of the room in your head, aware that even the presence of your own body, mostly water, can act as a reflector for neutrons, nudging the chemistry toward a dangerous edge. It is a strange way to live, to be constantly mindful of the invisible shapes of energy that surround you, treating the very air between your hands as a barrier that must not be breached. As you work, the scratching of your fountain pen against the logbook provides a grounding, earthy sound. You record the volumes, the temperatures, and the times, your handwriting steady despite the weight of the tasks. The ink flows dark and wet onto the page, a permanent record of a day spent in the service of the unseen. You think of the others working in similar rooms across the site, the physicists, the technicians, the young men and women who have become masters of this invisible landscape. There is a shared language here, a vocabulary of half-lives and isotopes that makes the rest of the world feel very far away. The secrecy of the project creates a kind of intimacy, a bond between those who understand the true nature of the blue glow and the heavy silence of the lead shields. The afternoon stretches on, measured by the slow evaporation of solvents and the steady clicking of the counters. You feel a dull ache in your lower back from leaning over the bench, a physical reminder of the hours spent in this concentrated state of being. You take a moment to stretch, feeling the pull of the fabric across your shoulder blades, and look out the small, thick window toward the distant peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The sun is beginning to tilt, casting long, golden shadows across the scrubland, but inside the lab, the light remains clinical and constant. It is a world apart, a place where the laws of the universe are being unraveled and rewoven into something new. The contrast between the ancient, timeless mountains and the cutting-edge, terrifyingly new science in your hands is a thought you carry with you, a quiet reflection that hums in the back of your mind as you return to your task. You begin the process of decanting a solution, your hands moving with the steady confidence of long practice. The liquid poured is smooth, a silver-blue ribbon that catches the overhead light. You are filtering out the last vestiges of unwanted elements, a process that requires patience and a keen eye for the subtle color changes that signal a successful reaction. In this moment, you are not just a technician, you are a guardian of a process so complex and so vital that it feels as though the entire weight of the war rests on the stability of your hands. The room is quiet, save for the hum of the fans and the occasional clink of glass, a peaceful environment that belies the monumental forces you are manipulating. As the final stage of the day's purification nears its end, you feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. The samples are sealed in their containers, labeled with meticulous care, and moved to the secure storage lockers. You begin the long process of decontaminating your station, wiping down the surfaces with a methodical thoroughness that has become second nature. You check your hands, your sleeves, and your shoes with the handheld monitors, listening for the rapid-fire clicks that would signal a stray particle. There is a relief in the silence of the machine, a confirmation that you are leaving the lab as clean as you entered it, at least on the surface. You peel off the rubber gloves, feeling the cool air hit your damp skin, and hang your lab coat on its designated hook. The transition back to the world outside is always a slow one, a gradual reawakening to the sights and sounds of the Mesa. As you step out of the building, the scent of parched earth and pine needles greets you, a sharp contrast to the sterile air of the laboratory. The sky has turned a bruised purple, the first stars beginning to prick through the thinning light. You walk toward the barracks, your boots crunching on the gravel, feeling the immense scale of the project reflected in the vastness of the desert night. The blue glow of the core remains behind you, locked away in the dark, but the memory of it stays. A quiet, pulsing light in the back of your mind as you find your way home through the shadows of the secret city. The smell of wood smoke and damp earth clings to your wool coat as you approach the row of green-painted apartment blocks, a scent that has become as much a part of your identity as the security badge pinned to your chest. In this high mountain air, the transition from the sterile metallic precision of the laboratory to the domestic grit of the housing area is a journey of only a few hundred yards, yet it feels like crossing between two different worlds. You reach for the heavy iron latch of your door, your fingers cold and slightly stiff from a long day of handling delicate instruments, and as you step inside, the familiar, slightly acrid tang of coal dust greets you. It is the perfume of Los Alamos, a constant reminder that even here, at the cutting edge of human physics, life is anchored to the ancient, soot-stained realities of the hearth. Your eyes adjust to the dim light of the living room, where the black cast-iron stove sits like a stubborn, silent tenant in the corner. It is a temperamental thing, requiring a steady diet of coal and a patient hand to keep the chill of the New Mexico night at bay. You find yourself moving toward it with a practiced rhythm, kneeling on the floor to stoke the embers, feeling the dry heat begin to radiate against your face. For the many women who have followed their husbands to this secret plateau, the tech wives who keep the heart of the city beating while the men chase the secrets of the atom, this stove is both a savior and a source of endless frustration. You think of the stories shared over laundry lines and shared cups of coffee, of the soot that settles on freshly washed curtains, and the constant struggle to keep the fine red desert dust from coating every surface. There is a strange, quiet dignity in this labor, a domestic defiance against the harshness of the landscape and the secrecy that shrouds your every move. Water is another precious commodity, a resource that must be coaxed from the earth and guarded with care. You walk to the sink and turn the tap, listening to the hollow groan of the pipes before a thin, clear stream begins to flow. There are days when the pressure drops to a mere trickle, especially during the dry summer months when the sun bakes the mesa until the ground cracks like old parchment. You have learned to be resourceful, to catch grey water for the small, hopeful gardens that have begun to sprout in the gaps between the barracks. These gardens are small miracles of persistence, bright splashes of snapdragons and hardy marigolds pushing through the volcanic tuff, a splash of colour against the drab, olive-drab paint of the buildings. To plant a flower here is an act of faith, a way of saying that this temporary city is, for now, a home. In the quiet of the evening, you sit at the small wooden table and look at the single envelope resting there, its corners slightly frayed from its journey through the mail system. Every letter you send, every postcard from a worried mother or a distant friend, bears the same enigmatic return address. Post Office Box, 1663, Santa Fe, New Mexico. It is a strange, singular lifeline, a digital needle's eye through which the entire life of the city must pass. To the outside world, you do not exist on a mountaintop. You are merely a number in a box, a ghost living in a vacuum. You think of the censors who read every word you write, their invisible eyes scanning your thoughts for any slip of the tongue, any mention of the gadget or the high-speed photography or the strange blue light of the core. You have become an expert in the art of saying nothing while meaning everything, filling pages with descriptions of the weather, the quality of the mess hall food, and the way the light hits the Sangre de Cristo mountains at dawn. The isolation of the hill, as everyone calls it, has forged a peculiar kind of intimacy among the residents. Because you cannot speak of your work, you find yourself speaking more deeply of other things. You notice the way your neighbor has used scrap lumber and discarded crates to build a set of bookshelves, or how the woman in the apartment below has sewn cheerful gingham curtains from surplus fabric to hide the starkness of the government-issued windows. There is a collective resourcefulness that defines this place, a spirit of making do that turns a drafty barrack into a sanctuary. You look around your own small space, noticing the small touches that make it yours. A favourite book, a rug that has seen better days, a photograph of a life lived before the war tucked into the frame of a mirror. As the coal in the stove settles with a soft metallic clink, you feel the weight of the day finally beginning to lift from your shoulders. The silence of the secret city is profound, broken only by the distant, rhythmic thud of a generator, or the occasional crunch of a security patrol's boots on the gravel outside. It is a silence that feels heavy with the importance of what is happening here, yet within the walls of your home, it is softened by the mundane tasks of living. You move to the window and pull back the makeshift curtain, looking out at the rows of lights twinkling across the mesa. Each light represents a family, a story, a person trying to maintain a sense of normalcy in the middle of a scientific fever dream. The mountain air is thin and cold, and you can feel the chill seeping through the glass, a reminder of the vast, indifferent wilderness that surrounds this island of human endeavour. But inside, the air is warm and smells of tea and fading smoke. You think about the paradox of your existence, how you are part of a project that could change the course of human history, yet your greatest daily victories are often as simple as a fire that stays lit, or a letter that finally arrives from home. This domesticity is the anchor that keeps you from drifting away in the high-altitude pressure of the laboratory. It is the soft fabric of reality that cushions the hard edges of the physics you serve. You prepare for bed with slow, deliberate movements, the floorboards creaking softly under your weight. The blankets are heavy and smell of the cedar chest where they are kept, a comforting, earthy scent that speaks of safety. As you lie there, watching the last orange glow of the embers dance on the ceiling, you realize that the secret city is not just a place of equations and assembly lines. It is a place of whispered conversations in the dark, of children born in a town that doesn't appear on any map, and of people who have learned to find beauty in the most temporary of circumstances. The vastness of the project, the terrifying power of the atom, the weight of the war, all of it feels momentarily distant, eclipsed by the simple, rhythmic breathing of a city at rest. You close your eyes, and the image of the blue core fades, replaced by the memory of the snapdragons in the dust and the taste of the thin mountain water. The darkness of the room is absolute, but it is a familiar darkness, a space you have carved out for yourself in the heart of the secret. You are a technician, a neighbor, a resident of a ghost town that is vibrantly, stubbornly alive. And as sleep finally begins to pull at the edges of your consciousness, you find yourself grateful for the coal stove, the drafty walls, and the strange shared bond of Box 1663. They are the things that make you human in a place that demands you be a cog in a great invisible machine. The mountain holds its breath, the desert waits, and for now, in the quiet heart of Los Alamos, you are simply home. The scent of pine resin and crushed juniper clings to the wool of your sweater, a lingering gift from the trails you navigated earlier this afternoon. Even here, in a town defined by fences and guarded by men with rifles, the vast, indifferent beauty of the Jemez Mountains refuses to be contained. You feel the familiar, dull ache in your calves, a reminder of the steep climb up the canyon walls, where the air grows thin and crisp, tasting of ancient stone and high-altitude silence. It is a peculiar thing how quickly the mind seeks out the wild when the world within the gates becomes too heavy with secrets. On your Sundays off, if you aren't too exhausted from the rhythmic hum of the laboratory, you find yourself drawn to the primitive slopes of Sawyer's Hill. There, the luxury of a modern ski resort is a concept from another lifetime. Instead, you and your colleagues, men and women who spend their weeks calculating the destruction of atoms, spend your afternoons clearing brush and stomping down the snow with your own boots to create a makeshift run. You remember the sting of the wind against your cheeks as you glided down those uneven slopes, the simple, honest friction of wood against ice providing a clarity that no mathematical formula ever could. In those moments, looking out over the Rio Grande Valley, the war feels like a distant rumor, something happening to someone else, somewhere far below this island in the sky. As the evening deepens and the temperature outside drops toward freezing, the social heartbeat of the hill begins to pulse through the thin walls of the community buildings. You pull your coat tighter and step out into the dark, your boots crunching on the packed earth of the plateau. There is a sound drifting on the wind, a strange, discordant, yet beautiful melody that shouldn't belong here. It is the sound of a saxophone wailing against the backdrop of a desert night, joined by the steady, rhythmic thrum of a piano that has seen better days. You follow the music toward a brightly lit hall, one of the many multi-purpose structures that serve as a church, a theatre, and a ballroom, all at once. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of floor wax, damp wool, and the faint, sweet aroma of tobacco. The irony of the scene never fails to bring a quiet smile to your face. There, on a makeshift wooden stage, stands a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, his brow furrowed not in thought over a nuclear reaction, but in concentration as he coaxes a soulful jazz riff from his instrument. Beside him, a world-renowned mathematician keeps time on the drums, his movements precise and mathematical, yet infused with a sudden, joyous abandon. This is the secret life of Los Alamos, a vibrant, desperate insistence on culture in a place that was never meant to be a home. You find a seat on a folding wooden chair, feeling the tension of the work week slowly dissolve as the music fills the room. It is a community built on the fly, a collection of some of the most brilliant minds on the planet, living in conditions that would make a city dweller weep. And yet, there is a warmth here that you haven't felt in years. Perhaps it is the shared secrecy, the knowledge that everyone in this room is carrying the same invisible weight, that draws you all together. When the jazz band takes a break, the floor is cleared for a square dance. You watch as the caller takes his place, his voice booming over the chatter, and suddenly the room is a whirlwind of motion. Lab technicians, secretaries, and theoretical physicists link arms, spinning in dizzying circles, their laughter echoing off the rafters. You find yourself pulled into the fray, your hands grasping the rough fabric of a neighbor's sleeve, your feet moving in patterns that feel as old as the mountains themselves. The choral groups are perhaps the most haunting part of these evenings. Later, when the dancing has slowed and the energy in the room has turned contemplative, a small group of singers gathers in the center of the hall. Their voices rise in harmony, singing old English madrigals or American folk songs, the notes floating up toward the ceiling and lingering there like wood smoke. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you, feeling the vibration of the music in your chest. It is a reminder of the world you all left behind, the universities, the concert halls, the quiet libraries, and a promise that those things still exist, somewhere beyond the barbed wire. Even the amateur theatre productions carry a weight of significance that belies their humble settings. You recall watching a performance of a popular play just last month, where the lead actress was a woman who spent her days monitoring radiation levels, and the lead actor was a man you knew only as a specialist in high explosives. They moved across the stage with a vulnerability that was startling to witness. In this secret city, where every word is monitored and every scrap of paper is classified, the stage is the only place where one can truly be seen. You realize, as you watch them, that these diversions are not merely ways to kill time. They are acts of defiance. By playing jazz, by dancing, by singing in a choir, you are all asserting that you are more than just components of a project. You are preserving the very civilization you have been tasked to protect. As the night winds down, you walk back toward your dormitory, the stars overhead appearing so bright and close that you feel as though you could reach out and brush them with your fingertips. The silence of the Mesa is profound, broken only by the distant, rhythmic pacing of a sentry or the low howl of a coyote in the canyon below. You think of the scientists who spend their evenings discussing philosophy over glasses of cheap wine in cramped apartments, and the young wives who have formed bridge clubs to stave off the loneliness of a town where they cannot tell their families where they live. You reach your door and pause, looking back toward the dark silhouette of the laboratory buildings. The contrast is jarring, the cold, clinical pursuit of the ultimate weapon versus the warm, messy human vitality of the square dance you just left. Your muscles feel heavy now, a comfortable fatigue that signals the end of the day's long journey. You step inside, the lingering echoes of the jazz band still playing in the back of your mind, a soft rhythm that guides you toward sleep. The mountain is quiet. The project continues its tireless march, but for a few hours, the music was enough to make the world feel whole again. You settle into your bed, the blankets cool against your skin, and as your eyes drift shut, the image of the dancers stays with you, spinning, laughing, and holding fast to one another in the heart of the secret city. The smell of ozone and stale coffee becomes the new atmosphere of your life. A sharpening of the senses that tells you the season of waiting has finally come to an end. It is the early summer of 1945, and the quiet, rhythmic pace of the mountain has been replaced by a low, constant hum of urgency that vibrates through the very floorboards of the laboratory. You find yourself no longer looking at the calendar by the week, but by the hour, as the collective breath of thousands of people seems to be held in anticipation of a single, looming moment. The transition from the dreamlike memory of the dance to the stark reality of the final push is seamless, a blurring of days and nights until the concept of a weekend or a holiday feels like a relic from a distant, simpler century. You walk through the corridors of the tech area after midnight, your footsteps echoing against the linoleum, and you notice that the lights under the doors never fade. Behind every handle there is the scratch of a fountain pen or the rhythmic clatter of a calculating machine. When you step into your own workspace, the air is thick with the heat of dozens of vacuum tubes and the quiet, intense sacerdotochinist of your colleagues. You take your seat at the long wooden bench, the surface worn smooth by months of leaning and labor, and pull a heavy brass lamp closer to your papers. The pool of yellow light it casts is your entire world for the next several hours, a small illuminated island in a sea of shadow. Your fingers, stained slightly with ink and the faint metallic scent of lead shielding, move across the slide rule with a grace born of repetition. You are finalizing the data for the assembly, double-checking the tolerances that will govern a force no human eye has ever witnessed. There is a strange, quiet electricity in the room, a tension that makes the hair on your arms stand up, though it has nothing to do with the weather. It is the weight of the finish line. You can feel it in the way the senior scientists pace the halls, their brows furrowed, their pipes forgotten and unlit in their hands. You can feel it in the way the secretaries move with a new, brisk efficiency, their faces set in masks of determined calm. Outside the window, the New Mexico night is vast and cold, the stars hanging like chips of ice over the Jemez Mountains. But inside, the world is shrinking down to the smallest of measurements, microns and milliseconds. You find yourself staring at a single column of figures until the numbers seem to float off the page, dancing in the periphery of your vision. To steady yourself, you reach for your mug, finding the coffee cold and bitter, but you drink it anyway, welcoming the sharp jolt it provides to your tired mind. The fatigue is not a heavy cloak tonight. It is a thin, buzzing veil that makes everything feel hyper-real, as if you are seeing the world through a lens that has finally clicked into perfect focus. As the clock on the wall ticks toward 3 a.m, a low rumble begins to vibrate through the earth, different from the usual thunder of the canyon tests. You stand and walk to the window, pressing your forehead against the cool glass to soothe the ache behind your eyes. Down in the valley, near the motor pool, you see the dim, hooded headlights of a convoy beginning to stir. These are the trucks that will carry the heart of the project away from the mountain, down into the belly of the desert. You watch as the heavy shapes move slowly through the gates, escorted by dark sedans filled with silent men in suits. They are heading south, toward the Jornada del Muerto, the journey of the dead man. The name of the desert basin feels heavy with irony and history, a stretch of parched earth that has seen centuries of travelers, but none carrying a cargo quite like this. You watch the tail lights disappear into the darkness, leaving only the scent of diesel and the settling dust behind. There is a profound sense of departure in the air, a realization that the secrets you have guarded so closely are finally leaving the nest, moving toward a destiny that none of you can truly predict. Returning to your desk, the silence of the lab feels deeper now, more hollow. You sit back down and pick up your pen, but for a moment your hand trembles. It isn't fear exactly. It is the awe of a craftsman realizing that the object they have spent years polishing is about to be put to the test. You think of the thousands of hours of collective thought poured into these calculations, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices of family time, the strange, hermetic life you have led on this mesa. All of it is converging on a single point in the desert, hundreds of miles away. The work continues through the dawn, as the sky turns a pale, bruised purple over the Sangre de Cristo range. You find yourself walking back toward the dormitories, your coat wrapped tight against the early morning chill. The wood smoke from the kitchen chimneys drifts through the streets, a domestic smell that contrasts sharply with the high-tech machinery you just left behind. You see other technicians emerging from different buildings, their shoulders hunched, their eyes rimmed with red, all of them moving in a silent procession toward a few hours of hard-earned rest. You reach your room and sit on the edge of the bed, the springs creaking softly in the quiet air. Your muscles ache with a dull, persistent throb, particularly in your lower back and the nape of your neck, but your mind is still racing, retracing the steps of the night's work. You kick off your shoes, feeling the grit of the mountain soil on the floorboards, and lie back, staring up at the ceiling. The sunlight begins to crawl across the wall, a slow golden hand that signals the start of another day of the final push. In these last weeks, the city of Los Alamos has become a pressure cooker of intellectual and emotional intensity. Conversations in the mess hall are hushed, focused entirely on the logistics of the coming test. The gadget, as everyone calls it, with a mix of affection and dread, has become the center of the universe. You hear whispers of the tower being built at the Trinity site, a 100-foot structure of steel that will hold the fruits of your labor. You imagine the desert heat, the shimmering mirages of the salt flats, and the long, lonely stretches of road where the convoys are currently weaving their way through the sagebrush. You find that you can no longer remember what it was like to live without this secret. The world outside the fences feels like a dream, a place of soft edges and unimportant news. Here, everything matters. Every turn of a screw, every decimal point, every drop of chemical solution is a vital link in a chain that is now stretching all the way to the southern horizon. You close your eyes, and instead of darkness, you see the flicker of the desk lamps, the steady movement of the convoy, and the vast, waiting silence of the desert floor. The sleep that finally comes is thin and restless, filled with the sounds of ticking clocks and the ghostly hum of the laboratories. You are a part of something that has outgrown the mountain, something that is now rolling across the landscape toward a moment that will change the meaning of time itself. And as you drift in that half-light between exhaustion and awareness, you feel a strange, solemn pride, a sense that despite the fatigue and the isolation, you have been a witness to the very edge of human capability. The final push is no longer a goal. It is a physical force pulling you and everyone you know toward the dawn of a new and uncertain age. The silence of the high desert has a way of holding on to secrets, but on that particular morning in mid-July, the air feels different, charged with a static you can't quite name. You are back at your workbench in the laboratory, the familiar scent of ozone and floor wax grounding you, even as a strange, heavy stillness settles over the Mesa. Many of the senior scientists, the men you've seen pacing the halls with furrowed brows for months, are gone, having vanished into the southern darkness days ago. You stayed behind to maintain the equipment, to keep the vigil, and to wait. The news doesn't arrive as a formal announcement, but rather as a ripple through the water. It starts with a look shared between two technicians in the hallway, a sudden loosening of the shoulders, a quiet, shaky exhale that seems to carry the weight of 3 long years. Someone whispers that the light was seen from 200 miles away, a light so bright it turned the midnight sands of the Jornada del Muerto into the brilliance of high noon. You sit back on your stool, your hands stained with the faint metallic grime of the shop, resting still for the first time in weeks. The gadget, the thing of wires and spheres you helped calibrate, has worked. A complex knot of emotion begins to tighten in your chest, a mixture of profound relief and a sudden, cold awe that makes your breath catch. You feel a surge of pride, a realization that the long hours of squinting through microscopes and the endless filing of precision parts were not in vain. You were part of the impossible. But as the details trickle in, the heat that melted the desert floor into green glass, the cloud that rose higher than the mountains. That pride begins to mix with the somber, quiet reflection. You think of the delicate glass tubes you handled just yesterday, and suddenly the power they represent feels almost too heavy for a human hand to hold. The atmosphere of the town begins to shift with the speed of a summer storm. For years, Los Alamos was a ghost in the geography, a place that didn't exist on any map, where your mail was sent to a nondescript box in Santa Fe, and your identity was a series of clearances. Now, as the secret begins to bleed out into the world, the invisible walls around the Mesa seem to shimmer and dissolve. You walk out of the laboratory and into the bright New Mexico sun, noticing how the dust motes dance in the light, oblivious to the fact that the world they inhabit has fundamentally changed. There is a new sound in the streets of the secret city, the sound of voices rising. People are gathered near the commissary, some laughing with a frantic, nervous energy, others standing in small, hushed circles, staring off toward the horizon as if they can still see the ghost of that distant flash. You see a young mother holding her child, her eyes wide as she listens to the radio broadcast, and you realize that for the first time she knows exactly what her husband has been doing behind those guarded fences. The masks are falling away, and with them, the strange, insular comfort of the shared secret. As you walk toward your dormitory, the physical sensations of the town feel heightened, more vivid than before. The rough texture of the wooden boardwalk under your boots, the sharp, resinous scent of the pine trees, the way the wind whistles through the gaps in the temporary housing, it all feels fragile now. You find yourself looking at your own shadow on the ground, a long dark shape stretching across the dirt, and you can't help but think of the shadows cast by that new sun in the south. The secret is out, and while the burden of silence has been lifted, it has been replaced by a different kind of weight, the weight of knowing what humanity is now capable of. Evening begins to settle over the mesa, painting the Jemez Mountains in shades of bruised purple and deep indigo. Usually this is the time when you would retreat into the exhaustion of your work, but tonight, sleep feels like a distant shore. You sit on the edge of your narrow cot, the springs creaking softly in the quiet room. Through the window, you see the lights of the town flickering on, one by one. It looks like any other small American community, yet you know that the eyes of the entire world are beginning to turn toward this isolated ridge of volcanic rock. The change is not just in the news or the talk of the town, it is in the way you perceive your own body and the space around you. Your hands, which have spent years mastering the minute and the microscopic, now feel connected to something vast and terrifying. You think of the technicians who stood beside you, the ones who shared the coffee and the complaints about the mud, and you feel a deep, unspoken bond. You were all residents of a shadow world, and now, as you step into the light of the atomic age, you carry the memory of that darkness with you. You lie back, pulling the wool blanket up to your chin, feeling its familiar scratchy warmth. The air coming through the screen door is cool, carrying the scent of rain from a distant canyon. The frantic pace of the last few months has slowed into a steady, rhythmic pulse, like the ticking of a clock that has finally found its cadence. You are no longer just a lab tech in a hidden facility. You are a witness to a new epoch. And as you close your eyes, the image of that brilliant, impossible light lingers behind your eyelids, a reminder that while the secret is gone, the mystery of what comes next is only just beginning. The town outside begins to quiet, the celebrations and the hushed conversations fading into the background noise of the night. The guards at the gate still stand their posts, and the fences still hum with electricity, but the urgency that once defined every movement on the hill has softened into a reflective pause. You find yourself thinking of the desert floor, now cooled and silent under the stars, and the way the sand has been transformed into something new. Like that sand, you feel as though you have been through a fire, and though you are still the same person who arrived here with a suitcase and a sense of duty, the core of your world has been irrevocably altered. As the minutes stretch into the deep hours of the night, you let the weight of the day sink into the mattress. The pride is still there, a steady ember in the hearth of your mind, but it is tempered now by a profound sense of responsibility. You have seen the dawn before the rest of the world, and as you drift towards sleep, you realize that the secret city was never just a place of wood and wire and stone. It was a crucible, and in that crucible, the future was forged, one precision measurement at a time. The scent of pine resin and old sawdust lingers in the fibers of your sweater, a permanent souvenir of a place that was never meant to last. As you lie there, the rhythmic ticking of a clock on the bedside table reminds you of the metronome-like precision required in the tech bays, but the urgency has begun to soften, replaced by the slow, steady pulse of the mountain itself. The Pajarito Plateau does not hurry for anyone, not even for the men in suits from Washington, or the brilliant minds who scribbled equations on the backs of envelopes. It has watched the ancient ones build in the cliffs, and it has watched the ranch schoolboys ride through the canyons, and now it watches you as the temporary structures of the Manhattan Project begin to settle into the earth, claiming their place in the long lineage of the high desert. You realize in these quiet moments of reflection that the secret city has undergone a subtle tectonic shift. What began as a scattered collection of olive-drab barracks and hurried wood-frame laboratories is no longer just a camp. It is becoming a home. The mud that once caked your boots during the frantic spring thaw has been paved over in places, and the barbed wire fences, while still standing, feel less like a cage and more like a strange protective shell. You've noticed the way the light hits the new concrete foundations, stark and white against the weathered timber of the original buildings. The transition from a wartime experiment to a permanent national laboratory is happening right beneath your feet, as quiet and inevitable as the changing of the seasons. The urgency of the war has passed, yet the work remains, rooted deep in the volcanic tuff of the plateau, as if the secrets unearthed here are too heavy to ever be moved. As the years begin to stretch out, you find yourself walking past the old T-shaped buildings where you spent so many sleepless nights monitoring the gauges. They look smaller now, perhaps a bit more fragile against the backdrop of the massive modern research facilities that are rising up around them. There is a peculiar comfort in seeing the silver-grey wood of the original structures standing defiantly amidst the glass and steel of the future. You remember the exact sound the floorboards made in the old tech area, a specific, hollow groan that told you exactly who was walking down the hall before they even spoke. Even as the laboratory expands, becoming a titan of global science, those original wooden footprints remain, tucked away in the shadows of the mesas like ghosts of a more desperate time. They are the silent witnesses to the moment the world changed, preserved in the thin, dry air of New Mexico. The landscape itself carries the mark of your presence and the presence of thousands of others who shared this hidden life. You can see it in the way the trails have been worn deep into the soft stone of the canyon rims, carved by the boots of scientists and technicians seeking a moment of clarity among the junipers. You feel a strange kinship with the plateau, a sense that you have left something of yourself behind in the dust and the shadows. The secret city was a crucible, yes, but it was also a community built on a foundation of shared silence. You look at the hands that once handled radioactive isotopes with trembling care, and you see the calluses of a life lived at the edge of the unknown. The people who lived here, the neighbors who shared your rationed coffee, and the colleagues who nodded to you in the cafeteria, are forever bonded by the weight of what they knew and what they could never say to anyone on the outside. There is a profound stillness that settles over Los Alamos when the sun dips below the Jemez Mountains, a blue hour that seems to suspend time entirely. In this light, the distinction between the past and the present begins to blur. You can almost hear the phantom echo of a jeep engine or the distant clatter of a typewriter coming from a darkened window. The legacy of the Pajarito Plateau is not just found in the papers published or the technologies developed. It is found in the quiet preservation of this atmosphere, a lingering sense of purpose that permeates the very air. You find yourself walking slower these days, taking in the texture of the ponderosa bark and the way the wind whistles through the gaps in the old laboratory siding. It is a landscape of contradictions, a place of immense power and immense peace, a site of world-altering destruction and quiet, everyday beauty. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, the physical sensations of your time in the secret city return to you like a familiar melody. You feel the cool, dry breeze on your face as you stepped out of the lab at midnight, the sky so crowded with stars that it felt as though you could reach up and touch the gears of the universe. You remember the taste of the grit in the air during a windstorm, and the way the smell of rain on the parched earth was the most beautiful thing you had ever experienced. These tiny sensory fragments are the true history of the Manhattan Project, not the headlines, but the living, breathing reality of those who occupied the spaces between the lines of the official record. You were a part of it, a single thread in a vast and complex tapestry, and that realization brings a sense of profound rest. The secret city is no longer a secret to the world, but it remains a private sanctuary for those who remember it as it was. The modern world may look at the maps and the monuments, but they cannot feel the specific vibration of the plateau underfoot, or the way the silence felt in the moments before a major test. You carry that silence within you, a quiet treasure stored in the back of your mind. The wooden buildings may eventually crumble, and the steel may rust, but the mark left on the people and the land is indelible. It is a legacy of brilliance and burden, of camaraderie and isolation, all woven together into the fabric of this high, lonely place. Your breathing slows, matching the deep, rhythmic sighs of the wind through the canyon. The weight of the responsibility you felt for so long has transformed into a gentle blanket, a reminder that you played your part with precision and care. The future that was forged in the crucible of Los Alamos is now the world you live in. But here, on the Pajarito Plateau, the echoes of the beginning still linger. You are a keeper of those echoes, a silent guardian of the transition from the old world to the new. As the darkness of the room becomes total, you let go of the day, surrendering to the timeless peace of the mountain, knowing that the secret city will always be a part of the earth, and you will always be a part of the secret city. The scent of ozone and graphite still clings faintly to your skin, a metallic perfume that marks you as a citizen of the hill, yet it is quickly being overtaken by the sharp, clean fragrance of the high desert air. You lean your weight against the rough-hewn timber of the porch railing, feeling the wood grain press against your palms, a grounding sensation after a day spent handling the delicate glass of beakers and the cold, unyielding surfaces of lead shielding. The plateau is quiet now, the frantic energy of the laboratories having finally crested and broken like a wave, leaving behind a profound silence that seems to stretch across the vast, ancient geography of the Southwest. Beyond the perimeter of the barracks and the temporary housing, the Chemez Mountains stand as silent sentinels, their jagged silhouettes deepening into shades of indigo and violet. You watch as the light begins its slow orchestral shift, turning the sky from a bruised purple to a soft, dusty rose. The shadows are long and thin now, stretching out from the edges of the canyons like fingers reaching for the center of the earth. These shadows possess a weight of their own, crawling over the pumice stone and the scrub brush, swallowing the paths you walked this morning when the world felt bright and urgent. There is a strange comfort in the way the landscape absorbs the day, indifferent to the monumental secrets being kept within the barbed wire fences and the cinder block walls. You find yourself noticing the small things, the details that the frantic pace of the mission usually obscures. You notice the way a single hawk circles high above the Rio Grande Valley, catching the last of the thermal currents, a solitary speck against the fading light. You feel the temperature drop, a sudden and crisp reminder of the altitude, and you pull your wool sweater tighter around your shoulders, the fabric slightly scratchy but warm against your neck. This is the hour when the secret city feels less like a military installation and more like a village lost in time, a collection of souls huddling together against the enormity of the wilderness. The sounds of the base are changing too. The constant hum of the generators and the distant clatter of construction have softened into a rhythmic, mechanical purr that acts as a backdrop to the more intimate sounds of the evening. Somewhere nearby, a screen door creaks on its hinges and snaps shut with a muffled thud. You hear the low murmur of voices from a neighbour's kitchen, the clink of silverware against ceramic, and the soft, crackling static of a radio being tuned to a distant station. It is a domestic symphony, a reminder that despite the world-shaking work being done in the dark rooms of the laboratory, life insists on its own small, beautiful rituals. You breathe in deeply, the air cooling your lungs, and you can almost taste the wood smoke drifting from the older stone houses, a scent that anchors you to the centuries of human presence on this mesa. As you stand there, the transition from the workday to the night feels like a physical shedding of a heavy coat. The calculations, the careful measurements, and the constant, low-level anxiety of working with the unknown begin to drift away, replaced by a deep and heavy tiredness that settles into your bones. It is a good fatigue, the kind that comes from knowing you have played your part in a story far larger than yourself. You think of the glowing dials in the dark labs, the steady drip of chemicals, and the quiet intensity of the men and women you work beside, and you realize that you are all woven into the same tapestry, a collective of minds focused on a single point in history. The light is nearly gone now, leaving only a thin ribbon of gold along the western horizon, a final reminder of the sun that has already dipped behind the peaks. The mesa is returning to its natural state, a place of wind and rock and ancient memory. You realize that long after the fences are gone and the secrets are told, this plateau will remain, indifferent to the flickers of human endeavor that briefly illuminated its surface. You are a guest here, a transient inhabitant of the Pajarito Plateau, yet you have left your mark in the invisible ledger of time, the lab tech, the keeper of details, the silent witness to the dawn of a new age. You have carried the burden of the future through the mundane tasks of the present. In the deepening gloom, the stars begin to emerge one by one, piercing the velvet sky with a clarity that only the high desert can provide. They look cold and distant, yet they are the same stars that the ancestral inhabitants of these canyons watched 1,000 years ago. You feel a sense of continuity, a bridge between the ancient past and the uncertain future you are helping to build. The shadows have fully claimed the canyons now, filling the deep crevices of the earth with a stillness that is both heavy and light. It is a time for rest, for the mind to cease its churning, and for the body to find its center. You turn away from the railing and step back into the warmth of your room, the floorboards creaking softly under your feet. The transition is complete. The workday is a memory, and the night is a sanctuary. As you prepare for sleep, you think of the rhythmic pulse of the city, the changing of the guard at the gates, the steady breathing of thousands of people tucked into their beds, and the silent, enduring presence of the mountains. You are part of this rhythm, a single heartbeat in the vast, secret life of Los Alamos. Your contribution was not in the grand speeches or the headlines, but in the steady hand that poured the solutions, the sharp eye that read the gauges, and the quiet persistence that kept the machinery of progress turning. You were the foundation upon which the giant stood. And as you finally lie down, feeling the pillows cradle your head, and the blankets settle over you like a gentle weight. You allow yourself to sink into the dark. The city is quiet. The Mesa is still. The work is done for now, and the world continues its slow, inevitable turn through the cosmos. The echoes of the day fade into the soft hum of the night air. You are safe. You are tired. You are a piece of history resting in the cradle of the mountains. The shadows of the Jemez have lengthened into total darkness, a peaceful shroud that covers the laboratories and the homes alike. Sleep comes easily here, in the thin air of the plateau, where the stars feel close enough to touch and the earth feels solid beneath you. You drift away, carried by the slow, rhythmic tide of the Mesa, knowing that when the sun rises again, you will be there to meet it. But for now, there is only the stillness, the silence, and the deep, enduring peace of the secret city.